welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast. In this episode, we have two games to speak about, of course, QPR and Derby. We have plenty of questions from listeners. We do have some slightly bad news on the injury front, but plenty to get our teeth into nonetheless. Nathan, I'm sure, given the results, which of course we'll get onto, you are in a somewhat of a good mood. At least I hope you are.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. A good week for Borough. Two fantastic results. Could have been slightly better looking back at things, but we'll certainly take those results that the week's given us and move on to the next coming weeks. But yeah, we'll get in and discuss these ones.
Yeah, so straight to QPR really, because, we might as well get on with it. Some changes to the team from the previous starting team, of course, at Man United. And I think, to be honest, we kind of expected it, given the one change in the team, Duncan Watmore, given his impact in the previous game at Man United. I think, really, I was quite happy to see him back in the starting 11. What about you, Nathan?
Yeah, I think given his impact off the bench, Manchester United coming on for Balogun, I think it was a fair change, really. We all know what Duncan Watmore brings to this Middlesbrough side with his energy and pressing from the front, and I think that we probably needed that going into this game. We couldn't really go into the game and just let QPR have all the ball. We needed to go into the game with forwards with plenty of energy, press them and just get at them really and impose our game on them. So I think Watmore suited that perfectly.
Yeah, and, going into the game now, really, Borough started off on the front foot, early on in a game where it could potentially have been quite the opposite, given both teams have been in great form as of late. Positions-wise in the table, there wasn't an awful lot separating them. QPR actually slightly higher up the table than Borough as of now and even before Wednesday night's game. But Borough started off on the front foot, looked full of energy, full of will to go and attack QPR. And that man, Duncan Watmore, was involved really in the first clear-cut chance of the game. He managed to get himself down the right, a nice little bit of skill to cut back and sort of try and deliver. His attempted cross was deflected into the path of Dijksteel, and Dijksteel just sort of tries to volley it low and hard across the box, really. And from that point, Neil Taylor goes ever so close to getting onto the end of it and potentially giving us the lead. Now, I know in a previous episode, I'm pretty sure me and you actually hummed and hawed as to whether Neil Taylor had actually ever scored in a senior game. I've since gone back and checked that he has scored a few goals for Wales, and he did score 3, I think, for Wrexham, where he started his career. But since those 3 goals for Wrexham, he's never actually scored. So the finish from Neil Taylor was probably not really, not much of a surprise.
No, of course, not the best record in front of goal, but that's not usually his role, really. But yeah, I thought we started pretty well at QPR on Wednesday night. Sort of just imposed our game from the off, really. Looked to dominate the ball. And we did that, and we created a few chances in that opening sort of half an hour. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good start away from home, and something that I don't think we've really seen from Borough in these games where it's a big game for the club. We usually sort of start slowly and gradually work our way into the game, but it was good to see us start on the front foot and look to sort of have the impetus in the game to take the game to QPR.
Yeah, you mentioned that obviously we had a good few chances really early on in the first half, and it was one of them where you start to think almost, are we going to have plenty of chances here? And the typical Borough way of thinking starts to creep into your head and think we're going to have lots of chances and then get punished for it. And just before we talk about that exact moment, what happened, there was another great chance from Borough's perspective. Crooks crosses it in, and Watmore, again involved, heads it back into the path of Andres Sparrow from probably no less than 3-4 yards out. And, everything signals a goal. He gets the ball on target, of course, heads it back across the keeper. And you're thinking, surely this is going to be the opener for Borough. Somehow QPR's keeper manages to get something on it and it goes over. And at that point, like I've just mentioned, Nathan, are you starting to think it's going to be one of those days here?
Yeah, it was a good save by David Marshall in the QPR goal, but I think it is really the only place that Sparrow can head that ball. I can't remember the man that was marking him, but he can't necessarily flick it to that far corner because of the man that's behind him. But it's again a well worked move, and sort of you looked at these chances that Borough were creating in that opening half an hour or so, and you thought we need to start taking these chances, or else it's going to come back to bite us. And it did really with QPR's first real chance of the game, I think.
Yeah, it was. And just talking about the goal now, obviously it was Ilias Chair who, bends quite a nice effort really into the bottom corner past Joe Lumley. But question marks perhaps as to how much time he actually has to sort of pick his spot and almost gear himself up for the shot, to be honest. From that distance especially.
Yeah, it was quite a strange one, really. I think Johnny Howson being dragged out of position, and he was actually the deepest Middlesbrough player at the time that Ilias Chair whips that one in the bottom corner. When really he should be in that sort of position on the D when we're defending there. But yeah, it's a good finish from Chair. Of course, just back from African Cup of Nations, and really you look at the players that they've got, Chair and Willock, and I thought really in those opening stages the pair of them were kept quiet really, and of course one moment of magic and his name's on the score sheet.
Yeah, that is the case. Obviously, QPR, as we saw earlier at the Riverside this season, they can punish you, and with the ability that they have, they're not going to be bothered if we're missing chances. If they get their chance, they're going to take it, type of thing. And that's exactly what they did, really. And obviously, Chair bends it in at 1-0. And, you do think at this point, or at least I did, is this going to be a case of, similar to Blackburn almost, where it's only going to be a 1-goal game and whoever gets that goal will go on and be winners? I did start to think that a little bit. But then the man that fresh off the back of pocketing Ronaldo, as if his week could have got any better, really, decides to pop up and get his second ever Middlesbrough goal. Big deal, Fry. From really a bit of a bundle in the box after a corner. I think it was headed out to Johnny Howson, and then Howson almost sort of, I think he tries to shoot and then finds his way into a 50-50 on the edge of the box with a QPR player. I can't think of who it was, but the ball sort of trickles through to Dale Fry. He then almost goes into another 50-50, wins that on his right foot. The ball bobbles onto his left foot, of course, his weaker foot. And, for someone that's only scored one senior goal prior to it, quite a calm and impressive finish on his weak foot.
Yeah, it was just sort of, well, when you look at centre half, sometimes you think that they're just going to be rash and just try and strike a shot at goal. But I think he has actually picked his spot there with his left foot, and he's put it in the corner. And it was a good time to get a goal just before half time, gets us back into the game, and probably changed Chris Wilder's team talk at half time going in the second half.
Yeah, it probably, I mean, you say probably, it definitely would have changed it, wouldn't it? Because, as I said, I'm sure the messages would have been from Chris Wilder, keep on going, because actually we're going into the break and we probably should be winning, 2-3-1. But had, Dale Fry not have equalised, perhaps, small tweaks may have changed. One thing I'm sure Chris Wilder wouldn't have said was, as soon as we start the second half, pass the ball to one of the QPR players and let him score to make it 2-1. Of course, that did happen, Nathan. Straight from kick-off, you think we've just got back in this perfect timing, right on the stroke of half-time. We can now go and take the game if you are. What followed from the moment it was kicked off, really, in that second half was, I think the best way to describe it is a disaster, I'll be honest.
Yeah, of course, Borough kick off that second half and switch it out wide to Jones. But Lee Wallace is there to cut out the option of going down the line. So he comes back and knocks a pretty simple ball into Dijksteel. It rolls under Dijksteel's foot for whatever reason. It's calamitous from there on, really. He passes it back to Joe Lumley, and Lumley's under pressure from two QPR players, and he tries to pass it to Paddy McNair when really the only option is just to get rid of it at that point. And his back pass is quite laughable, really. His pass to McNair, it's got no pace on it whatsoever, and it's pretty much a perfect pass for Chris Willock to just slot home. And yeah, 20 seconds into that second half, Borough find themselves 2-1 down in a game that in the first half they were dominating, and now they had to find another equaliser once again.
Yeah, I mean, just on Joe Lumley, obviously, Nathan, I think it's fair to say that he's received probably, out of the whole squad, possibly the most criticism this season. I know obviously Tav splits opinion, but, directly in terms of some of the mistakes that he has made. And, he's held his hands up and said that, earlier on in the season, he did make a few mistakes. Obviously, he lost his place in the team for a brief spell as well. But on Lumley, for me personally, goalkeeper was one position in January that I thought that Chris Wilder would 100% address, because, we had seen earlier on the season, as I say, Lumley had started the season and then, of course, was replaced by Luke Daniels. And you sort of thought, well, yes, Lumley gets back in under Chris Wilder, but then that's a position that needs strength. And, I've always looked at that throughout the season and thought, if we are to go somewhere this season, that's one position that might perhaps let us down a little bit. And, even looking back at the United game, of course, previous mistakes that we've seen from Joe Lumley, there always does seem to be at least one moment in a game where your heart sinks. And it's almost like a gift. There was the Bruno Fernandes chance at Old Trafford, the mistake which cost us in the QPR game. And even as we go on to the Derby game, there was a moment yesterday where everyone sort of had the heart in the mouth again. Are you, looking back now, a little bit surprised that we didn't strengthen? And on Lumley, do you think that, should he make more mistakes, that he may be in danger of losing his position again?
I think it's an interesting question, 100%. I think at the start of the season, when we brought in two goalkeepers, you just look at the goalkeepers that we brought in, of course, Joe Lumley and Luke Daniels, both number twos at their former clubs, QPR and Brentford, respectively. But both were sort of brought in, and looking back at their former clubs' reactions when they left from fans that had watched them previously, they were said to be steady number twos that wouldn't necessarily threaten getting into that number one spot. So I think really both of them have the ability to drop a clanger, but I think all keepers have that ability, to be fair. On Lumley and mistakes and future mistakes, I think as long as his confidence in himself is there, I think he holds that number one spot from now on. I think just how comfortable he is with his feet compared to Daniels holds him in higher stead for Chris Wilder. And I think even after that QPR mistake there, where of course I've just said he's slightly better with his feet than Daniels, I think even at times yesterday against Derby, when he had the ball at his feet, fans were quite anxious when he was sort of put under the slightest little bit of pressure. But I think a few good performances where he makes a few good saves and is comfortable with his feet, and his distribution is okay. And I think it'll not necessarily be forgotten, but it'll be put back on the back burner for a little while, this conversation.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying, I think the obvious reason why Lumley will retain his place in goal, and, unless something goes horrifically wrong, I think that will be the case from now until the end of the season, is because of his ability. And it sounds daft because, his ability, as we're calling it, with his feet is what's cost us the goal against QPR. But, he's way more comfortable on the ball than Luke Daniels is, isn't he? And, I think Chris Wilder, we've spoken about it before on this podcast, he prefers a goalkeeper that is, someone that can pick out a pass, can start attacks. I think in fairness to Lumley, we've all saw his kicking ability at times. It's quite good, I would say. It's certainly, it's not tremendous, but he has the ability to start off attacks, and I'm sure that's what Chris Wilder sees in him. But yeah, just a slight, I guess you could call it, concern from that game, because there is these moments where you do, as I say, sort of swallow your heart a little bit and think, oh, they might score off this, or how are they not scored off that? And yeah, I think with Lumley moving forward, as you say, hopefully he retains confidence. He seems quite the confident guy. I don't know him personally, but he gets involved with the crowd, those type of things. And yeah, I hope he does sort of pick his head up from that QPR mistake, because certainly what is important in these, teams that go for promotion, go for the playoffs, is a goalkeeper behind a defence that the defence can feel like, yeah, we're safe with him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's certainly one to keep an eye on, but I think Lumley will retain his place going forward, certainly.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily even a problem with his ability with his feet, really. I think that mistake just comes from his decision making, to be fair. Of course, Chris Wilder's teams want to play out from the back, want to be comfortable with goalkeepers and defenders with the balls at their feet, and really just needs to know when to play and when to just get rid of it. And he's made a mistake there, and it's cost us a goal. But luckily, the outfielders have pulled him out of the muck that day.
Yeah, back onto the game, we spent a little bit, of time on Joe Lumley, and there has been question marks, so I think it's right that we do sort of discuss it. But on back to the forwards, Andras Sparrow goes closest, really not long after we concede the goal from Joe Lumley's error. From the people that I was watching the game with, a few of them actually thought this effort was an attempted cross that he sort of skewed. But I actually think that Sparrow's trying to score from, and I think you know which chance I'm talking about, it's quite a tight angle, and it bounces on the half volley, and he sort of cuts across it and goes incredibly close. It cannons back off the bar, but, if he is trying to go for goal, which I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he was, one hell of an effort from a very tight angle.
Yeah, it was a tight angle. And to be fair, it was relatively similar to QPR's second goal. Borough pressing quite high up the pitch, pressing the goalkeeper, and he sort of skews his pass. Crooksy wins the header and knocks it on. Watmore blocks off their defender who's trying to come across, and Sparrow hits that shot. He rattles the bar, of course. It's a good effort from a tight angle. Tavernier will feel hard done by. He was making a late run into the box pretty well unmarked. Had Sparrow seen him, but a striker in that sort of space with that sort of chance given to him, he's not going to do anything else bar shoot, is he? So yeah, another effort gone begging, and I think at this time I was starting to think this is not going to be our night. This.
Yeah, and just as those thoughts were again starting to creep in, and myself, I was having the exact same thoughts, Nathan. Isaiah Jones, the man of the moment, the man of the season, really takes matters into his own hands again. And I'm sure everyone has seen the clips that have gone around on social media of the goal. Of course, I think Middlesbrough even tweeted it out. the piece of individual brilliance to nutmeg. I think it's Lee Wallace out on the far side, and then, put a striker's dream of a cross in. It's once again, I said yesterday to Alfie, who I do the commentary with, I said, I'm running out of superlatives to describe him, because game after game he just delivers these moments where we score off, and you think, should the whole of the league actually be talking about this man instead of a certain other Borough right back at Nottingham Forest?
No, I don't think they should. I don't know who you're talking about, actually. Not a Scooby-Doo who you're talking about, but yeah, that man down that right-hand side again just continues to create chances for Middlesbrough and continues to offer so much. And yeah, fantastic down that right-hand side once again. Just stands Lee Wallace up and just catches him square on, really. Lee Wallace just no idea what sort of space is behind him, and Jones just pops it through his legs and says, see you later, on his way past, and puts a fantastic ball across. And I think if our former player, Uncle Albert, doesn't tap that one in for us, then I think Neil Taylor's going to come in and get his fourth goal of his playing career. So yeah, fantastic work down that side. But in the build up to it, I thought really, really good play, just sustained attacks. Every single time an attack got cleared, we were on it again, looking to create, just patient as well, switching it from left to right, and working it wide, trying to create that space for Jones down that side. And yeah, we got that all important equaliser that got us back level.
Yeah, we did. And, it's interesting that you mentioned there the sustain of attacks. And, it's one thing that as fans, it often gets a little bit of a sort of bad reception. I don't want to say bad reception, but almost like sort of some fans think, just get it in the box type of thing. And one thing that Chris Wilder's been adamant about with his team, and from what you can see when you watch this Middlesbrough team, is under no illusions, if you don't have an option, just sling it in the box and hope for the best. He wants his team to pick out the right pass at the right time and, increase their chances of scoring a goal, because how many times do you see in games where a team needs a goal, they just do resort to and just sling it in the box and hope for the best type of thing? But it's just not the case with this Middlesbrough team. They are happy to pick up second balls. If one cross is delivered and, that's not a sort of punt into the box, it's a pass into the box that's cleared, they win the second ball, and then this process starts again. They work from left to right. They pick out neat little passes. The fullbacks or wing backs, I guess you would call them, go high. The centre backs are able to then overlap, and of course that creates Chris Wilder's usual sort of famous system. But as you say, it's almost, it's taken a little bit of time to get used to, because we talk about teams, devoid of ideas sometimes in games and crossing balls into the box with no hope really of actually scoring. And I'm just going to love it, actually. It's almost like at times Borough are just teasing the enemy, just playing it from one side to the other. And then it's just that one pass. And often it's Isaiah Jones that picks it up on the right, beats his fullback. And then there's your goal again. And as you say, Uncle Albert sticks it in. And, it's never nice to see Uncle Albert go through that. But, in this circumstance, it was actually beautiful to see, to be honest.
It was.
And yeah, we get back on level terms. And from then on, to be honest, had a few chances, not as many clear cutters probably before we found the equaliser, but certainly chances that we could have went on and nicked it with. Were you sort of looking back at this game and even during the game thinking, although it's a good result away from home, a little bit of sort of, not anger, but frustration probably that we couldn't go on and get that goal?
Yeah, I think looking back on the first half chances, especially, you look at that Sperrar one, and you just hope that maybe he plants it low, and we get that goal. But yeah, I think QPR, to be fair, looked very average, if I'm honest. I didn't think that they posed the sort of threat that they did when they came to the Riverside earlier on in the season. I thought that they were very physical going forward. Of course, Dykes gave a few knocks to Dalo in the first half, but I think you're always going to get that with centre forwards like Lyndon Dykes. They're very physical in the game and will look to hold things up and, well, play with the ball on their chest and their head quite regularly as well, to be fair. So yeah, I thought getting at QPR, I thought we were quite decent at it. But yeah, I think going away to a side that is in and around the playoffs and taking a point isn't the worst result in the world. And but certainly before the game, I would have taken a point away at QPR.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think you're right. Before 100%, I would have snapped a hand off, whether it be yours or whoever else, for that point. But looking back at the game, you do sort of feel a little bit of frustration that we couldn't get the job done. One real incident that left a little bit of a sour taste from the game, of course, Martin Piero was introduced for Matt Crooks after he went off with a head injury. And, his eagerness to really go and win the ball back for Borough sort of ended up in him picking up an injury. And by the sounds of things, and really from the first look, as soon as Piero went down, it didn't look great. He tries to almost tackle from behind, and I think gets his boot stuck in the ground, and all his weight goes onto the other side of his body. And yeah, straight away, like I say, it didn't look good. And it was one of them where you don't really actually want to watch.
Yeah, it was horrible seeing his left ankle get caught in the ground, and he just went through, and yeah, it looked like a very sore one. You could see the pain he was in on the floor. Of course, the stretcher came out, and Borough had made all the subs at this point. So with going into added time, we were playing with 10 men, which was not great, especially with QPR having a few attacks. But just going back to Piero, I think he's very unfortunate. He's just trying to make an impression. Sort of QPR had possession at the time and looked like they were going to launch an attack, and he's just tried to stop that attack by flying into, I'm sure it was Lee Wallace on that left hand side for QPR. But yeah, he got stretchered off. I thought Leo was fantastic in it, or Leo holding the stretcher as well with all the paramedics. But yeah, not nice to see at all. And the news doesn't look great either. Chris Wilder saying yesterday that it doesn't look like a 3-week sort of let off Piero. So it's a massively unfortunate one for a player that a lot of Borough fans are holding out massive hope for. We've seen the signs that he's given us so far, and yeah, hopefully he recovers well and is back in the side come the end of the season. But yeah, we're not holding out too much hope at this moment in time, I don't think.
Yeah, and just as you mentioned Leo there, for those watching on YouTube, they might be thinking, why is Chris grinning? It's such horrible news, and it was before you mentioned thinking of Leo, coming on the pitch, just showing exactly what he's about. Of course, being the translator Piero, and just getting his hands dirty. I mean, how often would you see a member of a club staff run on the pitch and give that much attention to a player, as you say, picking up the stretcher, helping with some of the medical staff, and it just goes to show what this club's about at the moment. That togetherness and the feeling of sort of, if one person goes down, then everyone's sort of, willing to fight for them, willing to try and grind out the result. And as you say, we went in extra time with 10 men and could quite easily have, let the sort of injury affect us more. But actually, QPR didn't really manage to fashion out any real chances whilst we were down to 10 men.
No, I thought that we dealt with it quite well actually. One moment that stands out is down in that corner of Loftus Road, to the left of Joe Lumley's goal. Marcus Tavernier chasing back, and just, I can't remember who it was, but just bodying them out the way and sort of winning Borough a goal kick, and the QPR fans are giving it to him. Tavernier is just laughing at them, and I thought, to be fair, that summed up his performance. He was man of the match on Wednesday night for me, Marcus Tavernier. He was all over the place and connecting the midfield to the attack really, really well. Played a part in our second goal. And yeah, he's becoming such a good player in that role in this Chris Wilder team. I think that left side of centre midfield is his best position now. I thought always, looking at Tavernier, he was good coming in off the right because he could get shots off with that left foot, but his work down the left with Neil Taylor and with the centre forward that's playing on that side has been fantastic so far, and he took that into the Derby game on Saturday, but we'll get into that later on. But just a shout out for Tavernier, I thought he was absolutely outstanding on Wednesday night.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for us to say, and for a lot of people to say, how hard he works and how much ground he covers. But I think that's sort of, that was always one thing that you could guarantee. But I think, especially the last two games, just to say his work rate is exceptional would be underselling him, to be honest, because, although, and it's still, some people would still make that argument of, well, yeah, he's doing all this, but, he's not scoring or assisting. But, if you watch games now, you can see the impact is growing. Even yesterday, as you say, we'll get on to the Derby game. He goes ever so close to scoring, but throughout the game, he drives forward with the ball. And in that, it's that word again, Nathan, and I'm going to use it. If you've listened to these podcasts throughout the season, when Chris Wilder come in, we spoke about the balance in midfield, and he just gives us that perfect balance of having a left foot on the left-hand side that, as you say, can link up with the left wing back, whether that be Neil Taylor or Mark Bowler when he's back fit. And also, even for, we're talking about the left-hand side and the work he does there, but even for the Isaiah Jones goal, you see him pull out to the right, and that just goes to show his energy. Again, he creates that little gap, which Jones then runs into, and his impact is starting to, increase game by game. And I think almost yesterday for me, and, this might come back to haunt me a little bit, it felt like he's just on the edge of where he is going to start, popping up with the odd goal and increasing his attacking output, as well as, putting the performances in that he already is. So definitely, I think you're right to praise Tav, especially for the QPR game, but also for yesterday's game, which we'll move on to now, Nathan. Team news for yesterday, 2 changes at the top of the pitch. Balogun and Connolly replaced Sparrow and Watmore. Were those fair changes or slightly surprising to you?
I felt that Sparrow needed a rest. I think he's been given a sustained run in the side and played very regularly for long periods in this very hectic period for Borough. Watmore, maybe on the other hand, I thought he maybe would have still started. As I've spoken earlier, his energy up front is exactly what we need and exactly what Chris Wilder wants in his forwards. But Flo Balogun and Aaron Connolly possess that as well, pressing from the front, very energetic, and have the ability to link up and also get in behind as well with a turn of pace, which I don't think Andras Sparrow has in comparison to those two. So yeah, interesting changes, but I think throughout this next few months we're going to see changes to that forward line very regularly, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think you're right with obviously the strikers, and as you say, for me as well, I think it was time where perhaps, we've seen a few weeks ago and Chris Wilder almost challenged Sparta to get, a few more goals because, this isn't a team at the moment that doesn't create chances. It's quite the opposite, actually. We need someone to, that QPR game, although we scored 2, we could have quite easily scored probably 4 or 5, to be honest. And, I think throughout his career, really, Chris Wilder's often been a manager that, given the formation that he typically plays, 2 strikers, he isn't afraid to change those game by game. So it was probably, I think, the right decision and right call to give Sparrow a little bit of a rest. And, Balogun and Connolly took that opportunity, which we'll get onto as we progress through this game. But on to the first goal of the game, it'd been quite a, not by any stretch of the imagination, amazing start by Middlesbrough, but a positive one, I guess you could call it. And it's Isaiah Jones again, Nathan.
Yeah.
Magic. And just, Nathan, I'm going to let you go in a second. But I have to almost pause when I'm talking about this man at the moment, because one part of my mind's saying, don't talk about him in case anyone listens and finds what a gem of a player we have on our hands. But Nathan, go ahead and talk us through that first goal.
Yeah, I think, well, to be fair, at first I thought Borough didn't start quite as well as I would have hoped, really. I thought that we let Derby just sort of have possession of the ball in that opening 10 minutes or so. I thought that they moved the ball relatively well. They didn't create anything, of course, but I thought that the game just sort of was just quite even in the early stages. I don't think Borough really created anything early on, but yeah, the goal, it's all from Isaiah Jones, isn't it? Thompson has the ball near the corner flag, and Jones, as we've seen it so many times, just flies into a tackle, wins the ball brilliantly, drives into the box, fires a ball across goal, and the Derby defenders really have no clue which Borough attackers are around them, really. And Buchanan just sort of dives in and fires one in his near post past Ryan Alsop. So relatively, I don't think Borough deserved the goal at the time. I felt that the game was just sort of quite even, but I was happy to take it. A bit of magic from Isaiah Jones down that right-hand side.
Yeah, as you say, a bit of magic from Isaiah Jones, and he was at it all afternoon, which of course we will speak about. But again, the only thing that sort of takes away from it a little bit, and of course, as we saw on Wednesday night against QPR, he doesn't get credited with the assist, unfortunately, in terms of the sort of rule makers of the game, because it's an own goal. But perhaps that might actually be a good thing, because it makes his assist tally look a little bit worse than what he actually has been providing for Borough this season. Just onto another incident after that goal, and there was 2 real refereeing decisions that stood out for me yesterday, and Derby fans have really spoken about on social media after the game. Going into the game, there was the whole build-up of the off-the-field issues, which on Friday were actually resolved. It was always going to be quite a feisty affair. Probably a few tackles going in that were, firm but fair. But one off-the-ball incident which happened, and I don't think it can really be deemed as fair. It starts off, Tom Lawrence goes to make a run into the box, and I think Tav just slightly catches him. I don't know if it's on purpose or not. Haven't seen it back. I don't know if it's just a sort of collision whilst they're both running. But then from that point onwards, Tom Lawrence is evidently not happy at all with Tavernier's involvement. They sort of continue into the box. And then from that point, as we see, there's a little bit of head-to-head, nose-to-nose, that type of thing. And there's not quite all too much going on. You think we see this every week almost. But then there is a forwards motion from Lawrence that, from my angle and perspective, looked to me like the type of motion that would warrant a red card. What was your opinion on that incident?
Exactly the same as you, Chris. I thought that there was that forward motion that is the type of motion that warrants a red card. But I don't know where it came from, to be fair. I was just watching the play, which was of course in front of the East Stand. But yeah, they just started having a pushing match in the middle of the pitch, which was very strange to see, of course, off the ball. But Derby, I think, were just sort of trying to, that their aim coming to the Riverside early on was to try and sort of frustrate Middlesbrough and try and get reactions out of players, really. Quite soon before that incident, Lawrence went up for a header with Dale Fry in front of the Derby dugout, and he came off second best. Dale in the air overpowering him, and sort of like just shoulder barged Lawrence to the ground. Lawrence's leg got caught under himself as he fell to the ground, and he landed quite firmly on his shoulder and proceeded to spend the next sort of 2 to 3 minutes hobbling around Borough's back three, holding his side as he'd been winded, trying to go into this tackle with Dale Fry and trying to sort of leave one in on him. But yeah, I don't think that's the type of player Tom Lawrence should try and be. He's certainly not a player I don't think that any Middlesbrough player would be afraid of in the physical sense, especially when we've got Matt Crooks running around our midfield that would just batter him. But yeah, such a strange sort of early stages to the game. Derby trying to wind Borough players up, but Borough just needed to play their own game, stay calm, stay composed on the ball, and just play our game, really, knock the ball around well. But yeah, that Lawrence probably on another day should have been sent off had the referee seen the incident.
Yeah, I think that's one thing actually that I would praise as of yesterday. There was lots of things that we could praise, but the fact that, of course, I don't really think the players as such would ever be really, getting themselves wound up because of off-field issues. Just from their perspective, it doesn't really concern them all too much. Perhaps the Derby players a little bit more, and we saw that. As you say, Lawrence, Derby's captain, probably just trying to set a bit of a precedent and unsettle a few of the Borough players, which, as you say, was unsuccessful, especially when you've got Big Dalo and Crooksy running around. But I thought we kept our heads well yesterday, and that was one thing that could have quite easily gone against us, because had, Tavernier reacted and we go down to 10 men, say, for example, it completely changes the face of the game. So, credit to our players yesterday for just keeping their heads and doing the job and, doing the task that was set out for them. Just as I mentioned, 2 real decisions from the referee, Mike Dean, which were talked about heavily after the game. Matt Crooks lunges into a tackle in midfield. To be honest, I don't really see what the Derby perspective is from this, because the foot that they're talking about in this tackle is, yes, off the ground, but doesn't actually make any contact with the player that he's trying to tackle. Just talk me through your perspective of this, because for me, and of course there's probably a little bit of bias, I feel as though Derby may have been clutching at straws a little bit with this one.
Yeah, I do agree with you, if I'm honest. EFL on Quest made quite the case for it as well, which I think is just trying to create unnecessary controversy, if I'm honest. I think Crooks picks the ball up in midfield and takes quite a heavy touch as he's trying to get away from a man. And really the tackle between Bird and Crooks just involves 2 players, both lunging for a ball, and Max Bird reaches the ball marginally earlier than Crooks. Crooks's right leg is slightly high. I think a lot of fans will say studs up, but it's not it's not the worst tackle I've ever seen. I don't think he's entering the tackle with any malice to try and do Max Bird. I think he's plain and simply just trying to win the ball, and he's slightly late. I think a yellow card would do that challenge justice, and he was rightly shown that yellow card by Mike Dean, who, of course, had a perfect view of the incident. If the incident is replayed again, Mike Dean is quite literally 3 or 4 yards away from it as it happened and had that perfect view. So I think it was the correct decision from him.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. And, Matt Crooks is a player that, gets stuck in, puts himself about. But I think one thing that you couldn't say is Crooks is the type of player that would go out and try and hurt someone. And certainly from that tackle again, it's just a fairly contested tackle, as you say. Bird gets there marginally quicker, but, the follow through, it's not, career threatening, certainly not. I think a few of the Derby fans might think that is the case, but from my perspective, and even taking off my sort of biased Borough cap that I might get accused of wearing, I personally don't think that it's a red card, but of course that's our opinion. Moving on into the game, Jones had already got one assist. We're going to call it's an assist, isn't it? We're going to call it what it is, despite the rule makers not maybe agreeing with that. Jones then switches on what can only be described as some sort of overdrive super boost mode in his system that, quite frankly, just propelled Borough into the break with a 2-goal advantage. Firstly, again, on that right-hand side, as we've seen so many times this season, gets to the byline again and picks out a pass. It's not even a cross. It's a perfectly weighted pass into the feet of Aaron Connolly. Connolly then spins well, shoots left-footed, and it takes a wicked deflection, doesn't it? I think one thing that could certainly be debated is if it's Connolly's goal. But again, Jones picks out Connolly perfectly. I think Connolly's probably going to try and claim it, and he probably deserves it for all the work that he did off the ball yesterday. But that makes it 2-1. Are we giving the goal to Aaron Connolly, Nathan, or?
Yeah, I'd give him the goal for that strike. I think we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here. I think we've missed talking about Derby's equaliser, but
Do you know what?
Do you know what? We'll skip over it because.
Well, yeah. Do you know what? That is amateurish from me. But actually, it just goes to show my excitement and the fact that me and Nathan are still just like every other fan getting carried away. Well, we should quickly go back because, it is quite a key part in the game, the fact that they equalise. So apologies for that. But it's exciting times at the moment, so I'm sure you can all forgive us. Tom Lawrence swings the ball in from Derby's perspective. It's headed out to Max Bird, who, in fairness, I'm not sure whether he gets the technique right or if it actually sort of comes off his shin a little bit, because it almost trickles through every single body in the Borough box and finds its way into the Borough goal. And I think, to be honest, the reason it's gone in is because there's that many people crowding Joe Lumley's view of the ball that actually, by the time it's, past the defenders and going towards the goal, he just can't really cover enough ground to make up and save it. And, as you say, I don't really want to talk about it, but I guess we have to. So thanks for reminding us, Nathan.
Yeah, it was just a goal that sort of came out of nothing, really. Derby didn't have too many chances, if at all, before the goal. To swing that corner in, and it breaks to the edge of the box. Bird hits it, and he hits it quite well, to be fair. Hits it on target, and it finds that bottom corner through a big crowd of bodies, and Derby get that equaliser. I think at the time when we conceded that, I thought going into half-time, sort of 1-1, the game could go either way. But sort of just a few minutes of madness for Middlesbrough, and yeah, we find ourselves in front and cruising at the break. And yeah, going into that second goal there, Aaron Connolly gets it. Great work down that right-hand side once again. We know all about Middlesbrough's right-hand side, especially with he who shall not be named down that right-hand side for us. Putting the ball across, Aaron Connolly swivels after a touch, fires that shot at goal, and it takes a big deflection off Curtis Davis, but no one's fussed about that deflection. It's Connolly's goal, and Borough back in front, 2-1 up. You think 2-1 up going into half time. Again, the team talk from Chris Wilder will be keep it tight, try and get another one. Borough come flying out the blocks immediately from kickoff. Again, quite similar to that QPR goal in midweek. Just being patient in attack, switching the ball from left to right. The goal initially comes from Jones passing it back into midfield, into McNair. Derby switch over. I think the player's coming out to that left-hand side. One ball from McNair's out there to Jones. He's isolated again by himself, and he's obviously got the beating of any defender in this division. Just sort of glides past his marker, crosses the ball, and there's the big tree to tap home. 3-1 Middlesbrough at half-time. And Borough were cruising, weren't they, Chris?
They were, Nathan, and, we're back onto chronological order there. Fortunately, we've got a level-headed person on this podcast, Nathan, that has reeled me back in and put me back down to earth after getting slightly ahead of myself. But yes, as you say, going into half-time with the 2-goal advantage, I mean, it was a mad few minutes, wasn't it? And as you say, there's many players that you could have wished had scored yesterday. But as usual, Crooksy pops up at the back stick. He just loves that end, doesn't he, as well in the Riverside, in front of the South Stand, in front of Red Faction. And he pulls out possibly celebration of the season, actually. Me and Nathan, I think probably you more than me, actually, avid darts fans. And they pull out the old Peter right, the snake bite right, him and Tav in front of the South Stand. I mean, we spoke a lot about celebrations, the Paddy McNair knee slide, the Andres Farrar knee slide and jump into the air. But this has got to be up there, Nathan.
It's got to be up there, yeah. At the time, I think us fans were just in shock that we'd had this mad few minutes, and then a quick look down at the South Stand, and you see Crooksy and Tav doing the Peter right, which is hilarious to see. And to be fair, I saw Crooksy pull it out last week at Old Trafford in the celebrations post-match. It was only a matter of time before it was out at the Riverside, and upon his first return to the Riverside since that Old Trafford goal, he pulls out the Peter right, and yeah, Borough cruising at half-time in a game really where you thought going in at half-time we'd be even, but a mad few minutes and Borough 3-1 up, and us fans could sort of breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah, as you say, breathe a sigh of relief, and we should go straight on to the second half. But just whilst we're on the topic of Matt Crooks, you may have seen that Nathan has actually this week become a bit of a prediction expert, because if you listen to last week's podcast, I did actually spring a question on Nathan that he wasn't expecting, and I asked him after Crooksy's tweet after the Old Trafford upset that we did see, what alcoholic beverage would be Matt Crooks's choice. And from a photo that has emerged on social media, we found out that Nathan got it bang on. He's a Peroni drinker, Nathan. He
is. Got it bang on. I just knew Crooksy was a cultured man. Loves a Peroni, and he deserved it after that goal and celebration, to be fair. So yeah, hopefully there's plenty more photos of Matt Crooks and his Peronis come the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, we should say that he actually deserved the Peroni more for his celebration than the actual goal, because what a celebration it was. Going into the second half now, really, again, for me, it felt like Borough were almost sort of picking and choosing when they fancied, putting Derby under real pressure. I think that 2-goal advantage really settled everyone's nerves down, and probably the players as well, because we saw a few chances. Connolly had efforts saved by Allsop. Balogun went close a few times. And really, as I say, Borough just kind of kept possession well, but then occasionally in that second half would think, yeah, we'll try and score another. That wasn't to be until later on in the game. And, following Balogun, although I'm sure he would have loved to have scored yesterday, got the second best thing, because he's pulled out a bit of showboat that if it doesn't feature, I should say, on Soccer AM next week on Showboat, is an absolute travesty to football, because between him and Duncan Watmore putting pressure on that Derby backline, they win the ball back, and Balogun could quite easily try and dink Allsop. He's desperate for a goal. He could try and fire a shot and get it all wrong. Instead, the sheer quality that he has, Arsenal's, star boy, I think he's being called, just thinks, well, instead of rushing this, I'll just add a little bit of a drag back, flick it towards Duncan Watmore, and he can add a fourth to the tally. I mean, that for me, although, on the eye, the initial sort of bit of pressure and mistake from Derby isn't as good as, a well-worked Borough goal, but that individual piece of skill for me, it meant that was my favourite goal of the day yesterday.
Yeah, tremendously audacious, just so composed and so clever to knock that ball into Duncan Watmore in that way, get it on Showboat Soccer AM. We saw in the week, Borough had made the Meg nuts for Isaiah Jones at QPR. That didn't actually feature as Meg nuts of the week, by the way, which needs seriously clearing up with Soccer AM, because that's a disgrace. But yeah, we'll move past that one if they include that Balogun skill in Showboat next week. But yeah, it just topped the day off, really. Fantastic piece of skill. Duncan Watmore's first touch on the field of play since coming on, and
first and only touch, Nathan.
It's what a start that is. First and only touch. It was like Sol Bamba last week. First and only touch at Old Trafford was the pen. But yeah, I think looking at that sort of last half an hour or so of the game, Borough had a lot of chances to put the game to bed. Their keeper, Ryan Allsop, kept them in it, to be fair, with a few good saves. He made a good save from Connolly. He made a good save from Balogun, maybe on another occasion as well from Balogun. I think after that goal that topped Borough's win off, Tavernier had a good effort that Ryan Allsop saved with his foot. But yeah, I think Borough really could have probably scored as many as we wanted in that second half. If we wanted to really make that game into a rout, we probably could have done. But yeah, it was a good performance, and really in that second half, Borough could just sort of peter the game out, really, with some clever possession play. And I thought the substitutes made decent impacts when they came on. Duncan Watmore, of course, scores that goal. I thought Riley McGree looked pretty comfortable. Of course, the game is sort of an easy game to play in midfield. When you come on in a game like that, you are 3-1 up at the time he came on, and Derby had taken off Christian Bielik, a defensive midfielder, when they weren't controlling possession of the ball, and brought an attacking midfielder in, Ravel Morrison, on. So their midfield was a bit all over at that point in time, a bit unbalanced. Going back to what we usually say about our midfield being balanced, And yeah, we could dominate the ball, but McGree showed some decent touches and looked to be proving quite decent in that midfield role with some combinations down that left-hand side. So the signs are there that he could fit into this midfield three pretty well. And yeah, a fantastic result for Middlesbrough in a week where the fixtures looked on paper very difficult, but Borough come out of it unscathed, really.
Yeah, certainly, and just a little mention for the substitutes, in particular yesterday, and more so the fact of the two players that were taken off and almost given moments of appreciation, which, something so small that perhaps people might not even pick up on. But the fact, Aaron Conley and us ourselves, I think, would be the first to say, in his first 3-4 games in a Borough shirt, I think it would be 3, probably, and rightfully, I think, provided a few questions as to what he had offered and what potentially he may offer going forward. And, in fairness to Aaron Conley, I think he shut a few people up yesterday with his performance, ran his socks off, got his goal. But what I liked is the fact that Chris Wilder gave him his appreciation. And it's little bits of man management like that that's probably the reason why every player on that pitch would run through a brick wall for Chris Wilder, because it gives the stadium a chance to stand up and applaud Conley, get the players' confidence up. And, it's that, going back to even Leo, helping out with Pierre, it's that feeling of togetherness that is back all of a sudden with the club. It's wonderful to watch us play at the moment, but there's also, I think I said it last week, you couldn't really name one player that isn't likable. We don't know these people as people. We know them as footballers. But, now, because of the player press conferences, because of the fact that we're seeing like little snippets from social media, and because wins are breeding this confidence and sort of good aura around the club, it's a wonderful team to support at the moment, Nathan, which, looking back earlier this season, it seemed a million miles away, to be honest.
Yeah, it's becoming, well, I say becoming, it is a real pleasure to go and watch this Middlesbrough side at this moment in time. I think everyone is sort of looking for the next fixture, just thinking, get us to that day, get us to that fixture, and get us watching this Middlesbrough side again, because not only are they so good to watch, we've got players that we love as people that we've seen in interviews and things like that. Just on Aaron Connolly's performance, I thought he was outstanding on Saturday. I thought early on, when Borough was starting quite slow, Connolly was sort of out the game a little bit, but he certainly worked his way in with some neat little touches. I thought he did well up against Curtis Davis, of course, a big physical centre-half, and Connolly pinned him at times and tried to bring others into play in that first half. Of course, he got that goal, albeit with a big deflection, but that'll do his confidence the world of good. It's a goal that has fallen for him, that one. And I previously said that I think that he could be a striker that if he gets one, he could go on a run. And when he's confident, I think that his natural ability in front of goal will shine, really. But in that second half, I think you even look at that chance that he had in the second half where he's got the defender up one-on-one. I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but he's faced him up one-on-one, gone to his right and fired a shot in on his right foot, and the keeper's made a very good save. But yeah, he was very good yesterday. And as you say, Chris Wilder subbing the two forwards off, it was a fantastic move, really. Man management is outstanding and also a very, very important aspect of looking after a promotion. A side that's looking to be in that promotion picture, really. So, yeah, those two up front yesterday were outstanding. Chris Wilder as a man manager and as a manager, I think we're so lucky to have him. What a coup that we've got there. Kieran Scott pulling him in has been an absolute genius move when he did. And you've just got to think, really, had we had Chris Wilder at the start of this season, where would Middlesbrough be in this table right now?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting question. And, with no intention of actually doing so, I've just used the word questions, and it leads us nicely on to some of the listener questions that we have been asked this week. Of course, it's always nice after some positive results to see what some of the listeners are thinking and want to know. I'm not sure about you, Nathan, on this one. We got a question in from William, and he just asked, what did Wilder say? Now, I'm not sure what Wilder said can be repeated on the podcast, but I think it's something about loving Paddy McNair. I'm not 100% sure, though.
Yeah, I mean, the chant's fantastic, isn't it? It is fantastic when it's booming around the Riverside at full time, and it seems like it's every time we're at the Riverside, this chant's booming around, and I can't get enough of it at this moment in time. Really, 6 wins in a row at the Riverside. Like, I can't remember the last time that's happened, but it must have been involving some sort of lifting a trophy at the end of a season. So we've just got to hopefully keep that up. But it's quite strange. It doesn't feel like we're at the Riverside all too regularly at this moment in time. It feels like we're away for 2 weeks and then we're at the Riverside. But we've got plenty of home games coming up, and I couldn't be more looking forward to them, if I'm honest. This Middlesbrough team has got me right on the edge of my seat and wanting to watch them every single minute of every single day.
Yeah, they certainly have. And, you speak about some of the historic records there, and 6 home wins on the bounce. Like you say, I can't think back to another time. If I was to hazard a guess, it would have to be under Aitor Karanka that may have happened. I'm guessing that will be the case, although I may be wrong on that. And also what we didn't even mention with the Derby game, the first time in the league at the Riverside that a Middlesbrough team had scored 4 for 7 whole years. And that was an Aitor Karanka team that scored 4 goals past Ipswich. It was in 2015. Little stats like that. And I'm trying to stop myself. You can probably hear myself tying my tongue as if to say, just don't say it, Chris. But little stats like that just sort of push you in the feeling of a certain P word that can't be mentioned.
Knocking Man United out of cups as well.
Yeah.
But we just need to stop it. We need to stop it right here, right now, because we're going to jinx it.
Yes, exactly.
We're going to jinx it. Yeah, every week on this podcast, when we do opposition previews, we say players' names and something always happens involving that player. So we just need to relax on this front. However, when I did say about my record of going to games under Chris Wilder at Man United, that continued, and I was not at QPR, but that was an anomaly, and I was at Derby, and that was all right. So we've just got to see. But yeah, I'm not going to try and jinx anything anymore.
So Nathan, moving on to another question we got, this time from Jamie, and he's asking, how much of a headache will Riley McGree be? Now, obviously, we saw him yesterday make his debut after suffering with COVID and being away with Australia, but some really good signs from him yesterday.
Yeah, he looked decent when he came on. But as I said earlier in the podcast, I think he came on at a time where he was going to get a lot of time on the ball. Derby had taken off Christian Bielik, who was their defensive midfielder, and brought on an attacking midfielder in Ravel Morrison, which sort of disrupted the balance of their midfield and gave Boro's midfield a lot more time on the ball, really, when we were in transition, when we were attacking. But McGree showed a lot of good touches. As for the question of how much of a headache will he be, I think Wilder summed it up pretty well in his pre-Derby press conference on Friday, where he said McGree will have to earn his place in this side, and we've said it when questioned about Piero as well, whether he'll get in the side. That this midfield at the minute looks outstanding. The midfield three, there's no need for it to be disrupted at this moment in time. I think all three of them have been outstanding in their roles, and McGree's going to have to earn his place to disrupt that midfield.
Yeah, he certainly will. And you know, something that I picked up on, strangely enough, on the pitch looks awfully similar to George Savile, not in the way he plays, but just from afar, which is slightly strange, but we'll move from that. Just finally wrapping up the questions, a question in from Connor. Now, I'm not sure who he's talking about here. Something about Izzy, I'm not sure. Have you heard of him?
Don't think so.
He's basically asked how much this Izzy person's worth. Now, hypothetically, if we did have a fullback that was getting numerous assists and contributing in the attacking sense of the game, as often as what, you know, the top right wing backs in football do, how much would you value this made up person?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but he's worth so much more to Middlesbrough than he will be to other sides, I think. And the potential is there for him to just get better and better. But I don't know about putting a price tag on it at this moment in time. He's only had one senior season at Middlesbrough under his belt, and we're not at the end of that yet. So I think we'll just have to assess what the situation will be in the summer. But everything's going in our favour with him. He's continuing to improve. He's just signed a new deal at the club, and yeah, we've got one hell of an asset there in Isaiah Jones, this made up person.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm sure there'll probably be Premier League clubs swarming in the summer, and for both of our right wing backs, of course, Jed Spence not currently with the club, but our asset, as you say. And I think you're right. And again, you know, it would be pointless to put a price tag on his head now, because for me, even if we were to be promoted, and, you know, if it's a big if, I don't think the club would be in any need of selling him, and I don't think they would, to be honest, because they have another asset in this really strange situation that's unfolded this season, where we could sell a right back for quite a substantial fee, and it wouldn't affect the way that our team currently looks, at least with Isaiah Jones as our right wing back. So, yeah, I think, you know, if you desperately want us to say a fee, I think from the reported figures that are being banded around with Jed Spence, I can't see it being any less than that figure. And I think that
treble it.
Yeah. So yes, moving on from questions, and thank you very much for obviously getting in touch via social media and giving us those questions. Just to wrap up the podcast, finally, we do have a game coming up next week, Nathan. A trip to Bristol City awaits, of course. Ex-Borough player Nigel Pearson, legend really of the club, manager. It'll be a difficult task, certainly. You know, no game in the Championship ever is. But from their position in the league currently, they are 17th. Today, at the time of recording on Sunday, they were beaten off Swansea 3-1. So looking at league table alone, you'd like us, if we want to, you know, be competing at that top end of the table, to go there and pick up 3 points. But of course, it's not as easy as that. And they do have some quite informed attackers, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And not only have they got the informed attackers that I'll name in a second, but they have won their last 3 games at Ashton Gate. So it is looking like a difficult place to go at this moment in time. But yeah, as a side, really, they do play 3 at the back with wing backs, 2 in midfield, and then with a front 3, sort of with Andreas Fireman in sort of like a number 10 position behind Antoine Semenyo and Chris Martin, who was formerly of Derby, who Chris Martin's always a difficult customer in the Championship. You know, he's a very physical centre forward, looks to bring us into play. And with players like Semenyo and Weimann running off him with their pace and ability going through on goal, they are quite a deadly attack, to be fair. Semenyo won Championship Player of the Month last month with 3 goals and 3 assists, which is a fantastic record, really. And some of the finishes as well over the last month have been fantastic finishes from him. So he'll probably be the main man, I suppose, looking at this Bristol City side. But yeah, as you say, no easy tests going anywhere in the Championship. And Bristol City away is one where you look at a massive trip for Borough fans and Borough themselves, one of the longest trips of the season. And Borough will be looking to go there and hopefully pick up another 3 points that sets us on our way.
Yes, of course. You know, you speak about Semenyo and what a sort of month or so and previously that he's had, and even a season really, because you know he's been around quite a while, Semenyo, and always sort of been on the fringes of that Bristol City team, but never quite nailed down a starting spot, and he seems to have done exactly that this season. And of course, he's been in great form as of late. You know, Weimann, we should say, has 15 goals this season, which, you know, in any division is an impressive return. And especially considering, you know, Weimann isn't really the out-and-out sort of striker in Bristol City's team. So certainly they do have attacking threats. They also have ex-Borough boy Thomas Callas as part of their defensive 5. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. But I think that probably wraps everything up, Nathan. We've covered an awful lot. 2 games again, some questions, and of course previewed next week's game. But is there anything else that you think needs to be added?
Just one last centre forward that seems to always do well for Bristol City against Middlesbrough. Naki Wells, he isn't getting a look in at the minute because of the front line that Bristol City you've got, but Naki Wells has seemed to have a knack of scoring against Middlesbrough in recent years. So hopefully Nigel Pearson doesn't necessarily realise that and doesn't start him on Saturday. I'll bring him on for that matter.
Yeah, well, we'll cross our fingers because we all know about these types of players. Cough, cough, Andy Carroll. So, yes, wrapping it up from us, another episode of the Boropolis Podcast. Please, as always, do give us some support. By all means, review us on audio platforms. Be generous, perhaps, and even subscribe. And as I've said in the last 2 episodes as well, if you are watching or listening, and I don't know, you're out walking the dog, who knows? You could be anywhere listening to me and Nathan talk rubbish about Middlesbrough. But please do let us know where you're listening and where you're listening from in terms of the globe, because, you know, surprisingly, Nathan, there is Borough fans dotted all over. We are global. We are huge, exactly. So thanks again ever so much for listening and watching. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast.